I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Justin Doc Brown. I'm starting the editing process for my third film, Case 369, Chris and the Quantum Gate. All of my films have been completely self-funded with the few donations we get from our fundraisers. We've managed to produce both films so far with an extremely low budget. We are having a fundraiser for this third one. It's going to be an excursion from our straightforward documentaries, sci-fi comedy mockumentary featuring myself, my wife Jennifer, Charlie Robinson, Stephen Stathis, Joshua Cutchin, Brandon Thomas, Frank Castle, Karen Holton, and many more surprise appearances. The film is going to make light of the woo that I discuss every day. It's going to be a fun excursion from my previous films. We're hoping to be able to raise enough with the fundraiser to advertise the film much more than we were able to with the previous. I don't work with any production outfit other than mine, FKN Productions. The ability to effectively market this film would be amazing. If you'd like to make a donation to help with our fundraiser, we have links right in the description. And be sure to watch my films that are already out in the streaming universe: Doors of Perception on Amazon Prime, Occult Louisiana's on Tubi, Roku, Apple, and a few more. We're booking guests for February. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Justin Doc Brown. He is an author, researcher, and host of the Prometheus Lens podcast. Justin, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, brother. I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you coming on. Really enjoy your work. As I was telling you before we got started, you're one of the extremely devoted, hard-working content creators that is a perfect example of taking what you're passionate about and making a career out of it. I'm really looking forward to sharing your work with the audience. We're going to be discussing your book, The Epic of Esau, which provides a compelling possibility for what we know as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. This is a very fascinating discussion, a lot to get to. Before we do, this is your first time on. Let the audience know a little bit about yourself and how they can find out more.
Hey, man, once again, thank you for having me. Let me get in front of the audience, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words also. But yeah, my name's Justin. Got the nickname Doc. Doc Brown's kind of like a little tag I go by, and I've embraced it back to the future wise. But yeah, man, I'm just a Southern man. If you couldn't tell by my accent, born and raised in East Tennessee in Appalachian Mountains. I always had a passion for history and the Bible, especially the Old Testament. I thought all that weird stuff was just fascinating, and just been a 9-to-5 knuckle dragger majority of my life. But I found this passion just a couple years ago and started just venturing out, talking about it, having conversations with authors and stuff that I read, and just really enjoyed it, man. Like you said, I found out that, you know, if you work hard enough, you can actually make a living doing this. And so I've always heard, if you find something you love and find a way to make money at it, man, you'll never work a day in your life. So I'm starting that journey this year. So I'm really excited to see what happens from here on out, man. I'm just leaning in, putting my nose to the grindstone. But yeah, like you said, my show is Prometheus Lens podcast. Anywhere you consume content, you can find it. My website is prometheuslenspodcast.com. And my book, The Epic of Esau, Birthright and Seed War, it just came out in January last year. So it's a year old now, but you can find it on Amazon or on my website. Get directly from me, get a signed copy if you want. But it's available on all three formats. You can get it in physical copy, digital copy, or you can actually even get it in Audible now. And there's no AI stuff. You get this Southern drawl reading the book to you. So you're without an excuse, people.
Awesome. I love it, man. Let's start out with what brought you to write this book and a bit of a synopsis.
Yeah, honestly, this was I say it every show I go on because I mean it's the truth. It started as a catty joke. I was with some friends and first got into podcasting just with a couple friends, and we were doing like Bible study, talking about all the weird stuff in the Bible. And we had Trey Smith on the show from God in a Nutshell, and we were talking with him, and he made a little joke like, "Hey, you guys are from East Tennessee. That's Bigfoot country. You know, next time I come that way, we'll hook up. Maybe we'll go Bigfoot hunting and film it." And I was like, "Yeah, man, come on down." And just out of nowhere, man, Genesis 25:25 popped into my head, and that's a verse I'd read most of my life, but never understood it, you know, in the light that I had at that moment. And for those that's not familiar, that verse says, "The first one came out red, covered in hair from head to toe like a hairy cloak," and it's talking about Esau. And I was like, man, that sounds pretty squatchy to me. If we just let the text say what it says, he was covered in red hair from head to toe. I mean, that sounds like a Bigfoot to me. So I brought it up to Trey. And I'm like, what do you think about Esau? Do you think maybe he was the first documented Bigfoot? And he kind of laughed, and it just kind of, you know, went over his shoulder. But call it synchronicity, call it God, whatever you want to call it. But these string of events happened after that. It was maybe a week later. I had Gary Wayne on. We talked about the Epic of Gilgamesh, and then I bump into Enkidu. And here's this guy covered in hair from head to toe, and is a mighty hunter. He sounds just like a mirrored image of Esau. And I was like, here's another one of these hairy dudes. And I think it was maybe a week, maybe two at most. I had a show. We were going through the book of Jasher, and there is basically another mirrored image of the Epic of Gilgamesh, I think, because there you have King Nimrod, the mighty hunter, battling against Esau, the mighty hunter, and they fight to the death. And so I just kept bumping into all these hairy wild men in these ancient, you know, Mesopotamian texts. And I'm like, man, I got to search this out and see if there's other hairy wild men in the Bible, and search out all these mythologies and do some comparative mythology and just try to put some pieces together and see if I can find a more complete story about this guy named Esau, and if there is a connection to what we call Bigfoot.
Right. This is fascinating. For those that aren't familiar with the story of Esau, could you give us a Cliff Notes version of this biblical tale?
Yeah, well, he's one of those guys, man. It's kind of like Genesis 6. People in our spaces, most of the time we say the red pill for us was giants. You know, Genesis 6, you know, you just get this little blurb about them. And to us, we're like, man, that's pretty important. I want some more context on that, you know, but it's like the ancient writers wasn't thinking of us. You know, they were thinking of the people that time. Everybody knew there were so many oral traditions and legends and stories and other scrolls that told the complete story of these giants and these angels coming down and breeding with women. So I feel as though they didn't need to theoretically beat a dead horse, right, you know, so to speak. Yeah. And I think Esau is another prime example. When we get into the Bible, basically all you hear about him is his mother becomes pregnant, and she's having all this pain and labor. She prays, you know, want to know what's going on with her. This angel of the Lord shows up and says, 2 nations, 2 peoples are in your womb, and they battle amongst each other. There's enmity between the 2. And it said that one will be stronger than the other, but the younger will rule over the older. And so that's completely backward from the customs of that time. The eldest son always ruled over the younger. And you get that story, like I said, in Genesis 25:25. He's covered in hair from head to toe. He comes out. His brother Jacob is clutching his heel. And then it kind of just fast forwards to when they're adults. And it says one day, and this is all biblical stories, and it says that Esau comes in from the field exhausted one day, and his brother's making red lentil stew. And he says, hey, brother, give me some of that stew. And he's like, yeah, sure, but trade me your birthright. And he says, well, What use is a birthright to me? When I am dead, take it. And that never made any sense to me, you know. And then it kind of fast forwards again. And it shows Jacob. He ends up not only stealing his birthright, he also steals the blessing. He kills a goat and wraps himself in goat's fur to fool their blind father into thinking that he is Esau, and steals the blessing. And, you know, that's kind of really all you get. And then you get some genealogies that, you know, you get to hear who he married, who his lineages were. So, I mean, you just get this little brief story about the guy, but there's so much more once I got to dig. And there's so many other extra biblical books and legends and lore and ancient writings that honestly paint the whole story of this guy. So I just took it upon myself to read everything I can get my hands on and gather all the pieces to make his story.
Is there any culmination to Esau's story as far as a conclusion to the story that may indicate what you're trying to connect here?
No, honestly, that's another thing is, like I mentioned with Genesis 6, you just get this little ambiguous, you know, passage, and they expect you to know because all the legends and lore and scrolls. And I think Esau's the same way. It's just all those things happen that I had described earlier, but then it just fast forwards and it kind of gives his genealogy, who he marries into, what clans and tribes come from him. But what's interesting, though, was thanks to people like Gary Wayne, digging through those genealogies, man, that we find out that Esau married 3 women. Once his blessing and birthright was stolen from him, it's kind of like he goes into full rebellion and gives the family the middle finger. And it says that he marries 2 women that are from Canaanites, and they're Horites and Hivites, in which they were commanded not to marry and interbreed with, that they were a cursed lineage. And his 3rd wife, he goes to his uncle Ishmael and takes his daughter for wife. And what's funny is there's kind of like a mirrored image, you know, kind of thing going on there, because for those that's not familiar, his uncle Ishmael was also the firstborn son that was supposed to get the birthright. But then later, Isaac, who is Esau's father, is born, but the birthright and blessing was given to him. So it's kind of like these 2 are identical to each other. So once this happens to Esau, it's like he goes to someone who can sympathize with him. And thanks to Gary Wayne, though, once I got to looking through those genealogies, and I found out that those Horites and Hivites are known Nephilim giant clans. And his father-in-law, mentioned in the book of Genesis, is named Seir, and he reigns from the land of Mount Seir. And when you get into the etymology of that word, that means hairy. So here you have this tribe of hairy giants, feral giants. And Esau here is this other hairy, quote unquote, man marrying into this clan and interbreeding with them. You know, I think this has a really high likelihood of throwing some really strange pups, to say the least.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So, and then when you dig in there, man, you find out through Louis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews. I'm trying to think, the medieval rabbi Rashi, all these other, you know, ancient writings talk about this group of people called the Amalekites, and that they were known sorcerers and shapeshifters. And that's why in the Bible, during the giant wars, this is the only tribe that God tells them to kill every man, woman, child, and animal, because they were worried that these guys would shapeshift into an animal to evade capture and death. So, but when you go through the genealogies, this is one of the tribes that comes from the loins of Esau. So they're described as these sorcerers, necromancers, and their name, Amalekite, means the blood lickers. So yeah, you have these you got these hairy, feral, giant people that I think what we would describe as a Sasquatch with our modern vernacular, and that they are known sorcerers, shapeshifters, and their name means the blood lickers. So it's got like this cannibalistic vampire kind of feel to them.
Yeah. Now, before we get too deep into the Sasquatch connections, you've also made some connections with the Garden of Eden and the serpent.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, once I got to digging through all this stuff, man, it was like a spider web. All these other little things kind of branched off to it and kind of encapsulated this theory. And if I backtrack to the book of Jasher, where I had mentioned briefly that Nimrod battles Esau. Well, in that story, it says that, basically they're both the mighty hunter. And I kind of compare it to the Highlander. There can only be one, baby. The other mighty hunter was going to show the other mighty hunter who the real man was, right? And it says that Nimrod had built up hatred and jealousy and envy toward Esau all of his days. And it says that he gets a hunting party together and goes out on a hunt to kill this wild beast of a man. So he goes on a Sasquatch hunt, basically. And it says that he separates into two groups, and that his group was him and two other Gibborim. And that's the same word used in the Hebrew Bible to describe the Nephilim giants. And a lot of people correlate Nimrod to Gilgamesh, who is also depicted as a giant. And so he goes out to hunt this hairy beast of a man, but it says that Esau sees him and hides himself. And then at the opportune time, he jumps forward, cuts off Nimrod's head, battles the other two Gibborim to the death, and that he takes the time to steal Nimrod's garments. And it says these are the garments to which Nimrod was able to prevail over all the nations. And then it says he goes home, garments in his tent, and then he goes into his brother Jacob's tent, and here's where it dovetails perfectly.
Hey, Justin, you cut out for I don't know, maybe 30, 40 seconds.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, I'll back up to where, okay. Did you hear the part about him stealing the garments?
You were just getting to that.
Okay. So he steals the garments and he runs home, and it says he hides the garments in
and
his
these were Nimrod's
tent.
Garments, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it says that these garments were special because through these garments is why he was such a mighty man, and he was able to prevail over all the nations. And then he goes into his brother's tent. And here's where it dovetails perfectly into the book of Genesis and that trading of the birthright. Because, he come in from the field exhausted, all right? He just killed the king, and he battled two giants to the death, probably sustained some life-threatening injuries, and he's on the run. He's scared to death. So I think the soup in that story, the red lentil stew, is like allegory for give me life-saving care, sustain me, sew me up. And that makes sense to why in Genesis he says, what use is a birthright to me when I am dead? Take it. So that ties into this Genesis story in the Garden of Eden. I just wanted to preface that before I went here. So when that happened, I was like, what is up with these garments? And it's like the next chapter in Jasher, it says that these are the supernatural garments from the garden of God that was given to Adam as a covering at his fall. And so then I was like, okay, I have to go back to the garden and reread this story with the new set of eyes and see what I can find. And in there, when you go to the original languages, it doesn't say that he put a garment of skins on them. A lot of people read the English and they say, oh, this was an animal. Something had to die to cover the sins of humanity. But the original language doesn't say that. It says that he covers them with a canonet. And that same word is described and translated throughout the Bible more often than not as a tunic. And this is the same word used for the ephod that covers the nakedness of the priests. And when you get into that story there, it says that the fall happens, he gets these garments, and once again, Lewis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews, Jasher, all these other ancient texts that these people were reading and were well aware of at the time, says that basically that Satan was the king and priest over all creation, and that at his fall, he was demoted. He was kicked out of his position, and his garments, his coverings, were taken and given to Adam. And Ezekiel 28, for those that's not familiar with that passage, that's unanimously, people agree that's a condemnation to the king of Tyre. But the language changes, and it's suddenly talking about this entity behind the king, because it says, oh, you were in the garden of God, perfect in all your ways, till iniquity was found in you. And it says, every precious stone was your covering. It lists, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper. It names all these stones. Well, this is a Polaroid picture of the priestly ephod. So it's painting Satan in a priestly role. And then, like maybe one verse or two down, to remove all doubt, it says, and you profaned your sanctuaries. So everything lines up. And then when you go through their legends and lore and Jasher, these garments were the sign and symbol of kingship and priesthood, and that they were passed to the eldest son. And this was the birthright. And it went to Adam, it went to Methuselah, to Noah, on down the line to all the righteous lineage. And it says that Noah had them going through the flood. But it says in Ham's going out, that Ham steals the garments and gives them to Cush. And that Cush in his old age has Nimrod. And it says at the coming of age at 20 years old, when Nimrod becomes a man, his father bestows upon him the supernatural garments from the garden of God. And that when he put them on, he becomes a Gibborim. So all that stuff's tied in. And I'll let you come in if you want to come in. I know I get long.
No, it's all good. What was that last thing that you said? He becomes a what?
A Gibborim.
What is this?
And that's the same. That's the Hebrew word used to describe the Nephilim giants.
Okay.
And when you get into the book of Genesis, that's something that a lot of people theorize on because it's kind of ambiguous. But it just says that Nimrod, it doesn't say he was born a Gibborim. It says that he becomes a Gibborim. And so a lot of people theorize and like, oh, well, maybe it was some kind of occult, sexual rite that he done, or maybe it was sacrificing, or just all these different theories of how he became a Gibborim. But according to them and their ancient legends, it was these garments from the garden of God.
There's also an overlapping legend of the Nephilim giants that they were born out of the sexual encounters with the fallen angels. How does this connect with the garments, or does it at all?
Yeah, well, once I got into that, and once I started reading all these other, books and legends and stuff, it kind of started filling in all kinds of gaps for all those ambiguous things in the scripture, like I talked about earlier. And one of those is, it kind of brought me into serpent seed theory, because when you get into, once again, Ginsburg, Jasher, the Targums of Jonathan, all these stories, they all point to Esau as being of the serpent seed. And so when you go back to Genesis, I had someone expose me to this theory, and it kind of blew my mind. It was right there in front of my face the whole time. But where it says that in the garden that Eve partakes of this tree, right? And we're told that, she bites the apple, they realize they're naked, they're kicked out, Well, when you go into the original languages, it just says that Eve partakes of this tree, and she, and the English says eats. But that same Hebrew word is translated many times in that same book as enjoys. So she partakes of this tree and enjoys. And trees are symbolic, they're phallic symbols, and they're also symbols for genealogies and family trees. So she partakes of this tree and she enjoys. And then she goes to her husband, Adam, and he too enjoys. And so someone said to me, that they believed that this was it was allegory for a sexual act. And when they started explaining it to me, so shout out to Dr. Joy Pugh. If you've not had her on, she's definitely one worth talking to, man. She's the one that exposed me to this theory and idea. But she said that, Justin, she said, God in the Bible, all of his cursings correlate to the crime every time. She said they always get the opposite of what they're trying to achieve. She said, so let's look at the cursings in the garden. She said, what happens? Once they enjoy this tree, they cover their sexual reproductive organs. She said, when I was a little girl, we weren't allowed to have cookies before supper. She said, but me and my sisters would sneak up there and steal some. Well, when we got caught, you know what we done? She said, we covered our mouth. Because that's where the sin was. That was where the transgression was. That's what we wanted to hide. She said, so after this event in the garden, they covered their sexual reproductive organs. And then she said, the cursings. She said, all of them have to do with sexual reproduction. She said, the woman would be cursed with painful menstruation. Her pain and labor would be increased. And that he would put enmity between her seed and thy seed, talking to the serpent. So it even says outright, the serpent's going to have a seed, and they're going to be at war, at enmity with each other. And once again, going into these original languages, folks, that's where you find all your golden nuggets. When you get into the etymology of the kids' names, that's Cain and Abel. Well, Cain, the etymology of his name means acquired. So, you know, what loving mother names their child acquired? They named him that because he was acquired by Adam, because it wasn't his son. He basically adopted him. And then Abel, the etymology of his name means breath, because it says in the garden that Adam was made from the dust of the ground and that he was a lifeless being until God breathed the breath of life into him. So they named him after his father. And then that's why you see right when they get out of the garden, the prophecy being fulfilled. It says, I will put enmity between her seed and thy seed. Cain kills Abel. And then later, Seth is born, right? Going to the etymology of Seth's name, that means the replacement. He was the replacement for Adam's son. And it says specifically that Seth was made in the similitude of his father, you know, separating the two. So this is the seed war. And this is all through the Bible. And they paint Esau as being of this serpent seed. It says it flat out. And then when you go to the birth of that, and you got to remember, guys, Genesis, you know, they didn't have a Bible back then. They had scrolls. And the scrolls didn't have chapters and, you know, little subheaders. It was just one single document. So they just read about this curse in the garden, right? And it says, I'll put enmity between her seed and thy seed. He said, one will bruise one's head, but the other will bruise the other's heel. So when you get the birth of Esau, the angel says, what? There's two nations, two peoples in your womb, and they're at war. They're at enmity with one another. And then when Esau comes out, he's the first. So his foot has to push on Jacob's head, bruising the head. And it says that Jacob is what? Clutching the heel, bruising the heel. This is a Polaroid picture of Genesis 3:15. And the ancient readers of this story, that's exactly what they would have thought. And so, yeah, they paint Esau as this serpent seed. And he marries into these Nephilim giants and interbreeds with them, man. The Bible's about a seed war.
Earlier you mentioned hairy wild men turning up at different points in biblical history. You mentioned, of course, Nimrod and a character called Enkidu. Talk a little bit about that, and where else can we cite hairy wild men in the Bible?
Yeah, and see, that was, once I found all that stuff, I was like, well, there has to be more. And so I got digging and looking through, you know, the original languages and stuff. And there's a couple more in there. And honestly, there's a pattern with them also that I noticed. It's almost as if like God's calling card is to curse people to be covered in hair. And so I got to digging through. And once I started going through the extra biblical books and the writings of Rashi and things like that I mentioned earlier, it says in there that there's this guy named Lamech, and he's a descendant of Cain. Well, the Bible says that when Cain does what he does, he said he's cursed to be a vagabond, to roam in the wilderness, you know. and that he was given this mark. And then all of a sudden, Cain is just scared to death. He's scared to death somebody's going to kill him. And you fast forward through his lineage, you get this mention of this guy, Lamech. And it says that in Genesis, one day he comes from a hunting party, or comes in from the field, and he tells his two wives, you know, if Cain was cursed, I'm going to be, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, but, you know, if Cain was cursed, I'm going to be doubly cursed. I just killed a man, and in my anger, I killed a youth. And, you know, once again, it's just a little ambiguous passage there. But the other scrolls, the extra biblical scrolls, give more context. It says that Lamech was growing blind in his older age, and that his youngest son, Tubal-Cain, would help him hunt and tell him where to, you know, guide his bow. And they go on this hunting party, and Tubal-Cain sees a beast and tells him where to shoot and to line it up, and helps him make the kill. But then when they walk up, Lamech can see, you know, I guess he can see up close, because it says once he gets close enough and sees the body of the beast he dropped, he says, oh no, I've killed my ancestor Cain. And so then he turns around and kills his son for the mistake. So God, you know, according to their legends and lore, curses Cain to be covered in hair. And it said he was given a single horn. And that's why he was scared to death, because he looked like this monster, that somebody was going to kill him. And so his descendant ends up killing him. And then if you fast forward, you have the story of King Nebuchadnezzar. And it says that basically he's so prideful that God curses him. And it says that his the hair of his body grows long as eagle's feathers, and that his talons grow long as, you know, like a bear's claw, and all this stuff. And that he would be driven mad, and that he would roam with the beast of the field and eat grass like oxen. And he was cursed like this and just become a wild man, and lived out in the wilderness for 7 years before he returned and become sane again, and the curse was lifted. So once again, you have another one of these hairy wild men that were made this way as a cursing from God. And I think it's fascinating also, all the descriptive language around these guys, and how I think it can be applied in other places, because without fail, all of your fertility gods of the ancient world are wild men. They're satyrs. They're covered in hair. And Esau comes out looking like a fertility god. And what's wild is you have all these little mentions in the Bible that I think people look over, but once you have this view, you see it. The book of Isaiah says that the wild men, the satyrs, when you go into the Septuagint, will dance in the wilderness and in the desolate cities. And I mentioned the Amalekites earlier. This is a race of them. This is a race of what I guess you could call feral giants. And what's interesting is those people are described as encountering God's chosen people first in their wilderness wanderings when they leave Egypt. And during this wilderness wanderings, they start attacking them and tormenting them, and they end up having to go to battle with each other. But what's crazy is during this time of the wilderness wanderings, when we know they were having firsthand encounters with these Amalekites, there's where you get all your rules and your laws and your regulations. And we all know, I mean, you don't get a rule, law, or regulation unless someone is doing those said things. Yeah. And like I mentioned, Isaiah talks about the hairy wild men, the satyrs, dancing in the wilderness and the desolate cities and all this kind of stuff. Well, in there it says, no longer will you sacrifice to hairy goat demons. And then it says, you shall not drink the blood. Their name means blood liquors. And it says, you will not seek necromancers and sorcerers. They were necromancers and sorcerers. No longer will you sacrifice your children to the fires of Molech. We know they were doing that also. So I think all those laws and rules that God was giving his people was because this was the practices of these Amalekites, and God's people were trying to imitate them. And God had to step in and be like, no, you're not going to be like these people.
Right. There's many modern researchers that are connecting remains that are found with elongated skulls to Nephilim, possibly giant ancient humans. Would you make that same connection?
I think so, because I think that when the angels came down, bred with men, in this whole serpent seed thing, the seed war, they were corrupting the image of God, because it says humanity was made in the image of God. So these guys come down and they corrupted the image. And we know from, I'm not some geneticist, but I did stay at a Motel 6 last night. But I hear some geneticists talk on YouTube and different things like that, but they talk about how mutations and things like that, any kind of changes, to your genome and DNA, that they're all random. So it's kind of like playing Russian roulette. You don't know what you're going to get. It's all random. So I think once they introduce this different type of genome or DNA strand, whatever you want to call it, into humanity, that it manifested in random ways. And I think that's why we see, we have stories about chimeras. I think that's why we have stories about Bigfoot. I think that's why we have stories about giants, and the same thing with these elongated skulls. And actually, I got a prop for you. I'll show you.
For those listening on the audio, if you'd like to see the visual here, come over to YouTube or Rumble.
Yeah. So here I got an elongated skull. This is a casting of one of the ones from Caracas. This is a juvenile skull. And I kind of called him Ed the Head. I take him around to conferences with me and have people sign it. So I've had Giorgio from Ancient Aliens,
nice.
and L.A. Marzulli, and all kinds of cool people sign this thing. But when I met L.A. Marzulli, he freaked out over this thing. And he was like, this is identical. I've held this skull. This is crazy. Everything is, identical. And when you go through some of the features of this thing, it's a hybrid. Now, granted, there are some that are from head binding, but academia wants to just sweep it all under that rug and say, oh, it's all head binding. But some of the ones they researched, like this one, have things that are totally different from all the other, ones that were deemed from head binding.
I think one of the features is the cranial sutures have a distinct difference between the ones that have been bound and the natural ones.
Yes. Yep. So you see that right here, that the Sadra Sutra is missing. So all the ones they find from, head binding, that doesn't change that. It still has that Sadra Sutra. And then another thing is they tested the brain case volume. The ones that they find that were missing the Sadra Sutra were like 15 to 20% larger in brain case volume. That doesn't change with the head binding. And then your eye orbits. They had an optometrist study these and measure them. They are 25 to 30% larger than the regular human eyes, and also the ones that were head binded. I'm trying to think. I can't remember what the names of them are, but you have these little sets of drill holes on each side of your cheekbone, down here at your mandible. You have a certain set, but the ones they found, like this one, have an additional set in the back of the head up here, up top. And they say these are for nerve endings and for veins for blood delivery.
Interesting.
So that shows you that this was built into the DNA. Yeah. These extra holes were to make sure that this head got blood flow properly. And then I guess the final thing I could show you, and this one's a really big one, right here is where the spine attaches to the skull. And they call it, I think it's called the foramen magnum or something like that. But if you Google search and look, every single skull, even the ones from head binding, the mount point is right here. It's dead center. And it's for balance. But this one's all the way at the back. Yeah. And it's that way for balance. Because if this thing was in the center, you'd just be looking at the sky all the time. So by moving it back here, it's better center balanced. So all those things just show you, in my opinion, that this was built into the DNA. This is a hybrid race. And if we take the biblical view, this is when the angels came down and bred with the daughters of men. And the Peruvian legends mirror it. They just call it different names.
Have they found many of the elongated skulls that would indicate they are giants, 7 foot or above?
From my understanding, I think they found, some that were like 8 foot tall and things like that. But like the majority of them are kind of average height that they found. But what I believe, science talks about the theory of entropy. Nothing gets better with time. It only gets worse. And so I think we see that with the DNA of these hybrid beings, that, when they were, fresh and it was not undiluted, that they were giants. They had these elongated heads. And I think just over time and interbreeding, that DNA got weaker and so they started getting shorter, and it just kind of started phasing these things out. And that's why in Egypt, you see Nefertiti, Akhenaten, so many other of these Egyptian pharaohs with these elongated heads, and they're depicted without their hats. So you see their head is elongated. And even it shows Nefertiti holding up her son into the sunlight, and he also has an elongated head. And some people theorize, I talked with Freddie Silva not that long ago, and we were talking about that, and he said, what's funny, he said, is we know they had elongated heads. He said, but all the other pharaohs, they have this really long hat. He said, I think it's because they were covering that head and trying to blend in. He said, because to this day, he said, we've not found not one of those hats. And I was like, man, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah, we've not found one. He said, and you have these guys depicted like this all over the world. And I mentioned Peru earlier. I love history, dude. And I love comparative mythology and seeing what rhymes. It talks about Viracocha. And it says that he arrives on a bed of serpents without paddles. It kind of sounds like a sailboat, maybe with that Viking dragon on the front or something. But it says that he shows up with his disciples, whatever you want to call it, his gang of people, and they were called the Veracochan. And they were described as pale-skinned, long beards, wearing these long robes, and that they came and they taught the 7 sacred sciences, kind of like the story of Genesis with the fallen angels. They showed them how to build all this megalithic architecture and all this kind of stuff. But all the cities that they named, they called it the path of Viracocha. And he goes all the way like northwest through the continent, and then he leaves, and he says, he'd return one day. But all those cities named without fail, they find megalithic architecture and elongated skulls. And the conquistadors, some of their journals and stuff document that while they were there, they noticed a race of people that were pale skinned, could grow facial hair, and had elongated skulls. And they asked the people, who are these people? They're obviously different. Who are these people? And they all told them, these are the descendants of the Viracocha.
As far as the actual size of these giants, we can look at documented history, what's been found at mound sites. They'll allow us to know about 7, maybe a little bit taller remains that have been found. But based on independent news articles and researchers, we know that much larger remains have actually been found. As far as biblical giants, though, this depends on who you're talking to, what research you're looking at. I had Mike, aka Stellium7, on the other day talking about the possibility of mountains being petrified giants. This is a wild one, but there are actually pretty compelling connections that he's offering. How big are we really talking when we're looking at biblical giants?
Yeah, and that's one of those things too, is like, anybody, if they're being honest, they'll tell you, they're speculating, or in the very least, they're making educated, and informed guesses. But we know Post flood, it talks about Goliath, and that he was, a giant. And according to, which translations you read, the sizes kind of vary, but they kind of put him at anywhere from, I want to say 7 to 9 feet, something like that, in between. But then you have pre-flood. It's like they were a different race. I think it's because, like we talked about earlier, entropy. Is more of a pure blood breed, so it was stronger. But it names King Og, and that he had this bed of iron. And don't quote me on the size, but it's something crazy, like 15-foot long bed or something like that. I mean, it's crazy tall. But you don't really get an exact size. But when you get to, I think it was Enoch, this is, an extra biblical book, it talks about, they were like thousands of ells tall, and tall as cedar trees. And of course, we don't know what an ell is. We don't. Well, we theorize what it is, but we truly don't know. But it does say that some of them were tall as cedars. And it's kind of hard for us to, wrap our mind around that now. But yeah, like you'd said, do I know for sure? I don't. But it's a lot of mountain ranges and rock formations and things like that that look like large people.
What about the possibility that everything may have been much larger? They may have had regular-sized humans, but they may have also had giant humans, giant trees, giant reptiles, giant animals. I had Jason from Archaix on. He believes it's something called the vapor canopy was higher, oxygen levels, but could it be possible that everything may have been just bigger?
Yeah, that's what I believe. When you get into the water canopy theory, it talks about, this was a once pressurized system, and that the oxygen levels were more concentrated and a lot more powerful and potent. So they've done experiments on this. They took lizards and different things and put them in these aquariums and pressurized it and really, purified and condensed the oxygen levels. And doesn't matter if it's an animal or a plant, it gets substantially bigger because the nutrients are just a lot more rich. So, and we also don't have to even theorize or look at that. We can look at the fossil record, and it shows that. A quick Google search, guys. Type in sometime modern eagle's head versus a pre-flood eagle's head, or a turtle. All the things that we have today, except for dinosaurs. And I know some people, say they're fake too, but with those exceptions, all the things that we find in the fossil record, we find today. But the only difference is they are significantly smaller. It doesn't matter if it's the trees, the animals, whatever. Everything was bigger, badder, stronger in the pre-flood world. But I believe when it talks about the great flood happens, it says that the firmament, the windows of heaven were burst open, that the waters from the abyss also burst forth. I think that water canopy was broken. And then that's why even it kind of correlates with the biblical text, because you hear about these long lifespans and these giants and all this kind of stuff. It sounds like Narnia to us. Yeah. But after this event happens, it says that God kind of curses the land and the people. He says, my spirit will not abide in man forever. His days shall be no more than like 100 years or 120 years. I think that's why you hear of people having, 500, 800 year lifespans back then, because of this water canopy. And I think they were bigger. And even their texts say that. I just read the other day, I'm going through Louis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews, on my channel. Every Sunday at 8 o'clock, I do a live study and a live reading. So I'm going through that now. But we just recently read that that Adam was described as this really huge giant of a man. But when he was cast down, he was shrunk a little bit. But he was still, what we would consider a giant.
Yeah. Let's tie this to Sasquatch. Depending on, again, who you're asking or what research, many believe that the bloodlines of the Nephilim are more likely tied to the elites, globalists, the evil sorcerers that attempt to run the planet. Not very often do you hear the connection with Bigfoot, although I have heard it before. But besides the size of Bigfoot and the fact that it's covered with hair, possibly psychic, may have supernatural attributes, how can we connect this to the Nephilim?
Yeah, well, with me, I think that I agree with you on the serpent seed, and the divine right to rule with these elites and things like that. But I think this, how I mentioned earlier, it's just random gene mutation and kind of manifests in all these crazy ways. And I think, this being covered in hair is one of them. Uh, but we actually identify this in our science books. And I did not know this until I researched this out a little bit. This is like a 2-year obsession of mine. So uh, we've barely scratched the surface on some of the stuff that I talk about in the book. But one of the things it's called hypertrichosis. And this is a condition that when someone is born, they're covered in hair from head to toe. I mean, this is a scientifically recognized phenomenon. And here's where you get all of your stuff like the freak shows back in the day, the bearded lady, the wolf man, all these kinds of things. And you have all the legends and lore about the wild men and women coming in and plundering villages and raping women and doing all this kind of nefarious stuff. So you have all the legends to back it up too. And when you go and look through the history, like for instance, I found this guy named I think it's Luis Gomez, I believe, or Pedro Gomez, one of those two. I know it's Gomez, but when you search him up, he looks like somebody off Teen Wolf. He's covered in hair from head to toe, but the paintings they have him, he's wearing like this regal clothing, like he's an elitist. And when you read his story, this is a historical documented story that this kid was basically cast into the street because he was a freak. Back in the day when you were born like that, you were seen as a devil seed, demon. So they'd kill you, or they'd just take you out in the woods and throw you out. And if you were lucky enough to survive and somebody take you, but that's how they viewed it back then. But someone had acquired that young boy when he was 10 or 11 years old and gave him as a gift to the king of Spain. But luckily for Pedro, the king loved him like a son, and he raised him as a son. And he gave him a title, sent him to the finest schools. He actually went to school to become a lawyer. When the king died, he bequeathed to him a piece of land. He arranged a marriage for him and done all kinds of stuff for him because he loved him just like a son. But he ends up breeding with that woman. I think her name was Mary, but he got with her, and they ended up having, I think, 4 children, and 3 of them had his condition. They were covered in hair from head to toe, and they were girls. They were also painted wearing pink dresses, covered in hair.
Wow.
And you have other stories, showing this is historical. This is not fantasy. And some of the elite families have this hypertrichosis pop up in their bloodline, and they tuck them away. They either kill them or they put them into like a psychiatric hospital and try to hide the family secret. And I talk about it in the book. There's one that I found through Nick Redfern. He wrote a book on the wild man. If you guys are into that, I highly suggest you check that out. But he talked to a guy that had a firsthand story. It was up in the UK that there was this mental hospital owned by this elitist family. And after so many generations, they ended up, giving it away to somebody else, but the family still sat on the board. But there was a security guard that worked there during World War II, and they heard some ruckus out in the woods and went to investigate, and it was a Bigfoot, a wild man. And one of them shot and injured this thing, but it was still alive. So they said that in the story that they took it back to the hospital, and that it was grunting and but it wasn't speaking, and it was a man that was covered in hair.
Wow.
And that they got him to the hospital. And long story short, without drawing it all out for you, but through their investigations, they found out that elitist family had several family members that were diagnosed with hypertrichosis and was checked into that facility over the years. But when they transferred the hand over, or the company over, to someone else, they pulled their remaining family members out. And so they theorized that this, Bigfoot, this wild man that they encountered and shot, was a member of this elite family that escaped.
Oh, wow.
Because they said when all this happened, all of a sudden, these people show up and they walk in, they grab the guy and put him in the back of a vehicle and tell everybody not to speak of it. And they leave. So, I mean, there's all kinds of cool little things that tie into this, and that, this is possibly a genetic mutation, possibly from the serpent seed in these elites. And that's why they stay so focused on interbreeding and keeping that bloodline pure, because it's slowly just degrading and almost completely gone now.
As far as the documented encounters with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, there's a spectrum. Many report aggression or seemingly malevolence from the Bigfoot creatures, but some report loving experiences and very positive experiences and psychic communication. Do you think that these creatures are inherently malevolent, or is it a spectrum just like humans?
I'm of the opinion that, it could be a spectrum, because there's some people, and I'm a serpent seed guy, and we kind of talked about that today, but there's some people in that serpent seed camp that believe that, kind of like Calvinists, how they say there's, your life was laid out before you were even born. You can't change nothing. And they kind of take that view with the serpent seed. They believe that they are, non-human, and that they're destined to go to hell. There's no salvation for them, and they're inherently evil. I'm not one of those guys, because, like I said, I believe Cain was the first. And when you go to the story where he kills his brother, God appears to him and tries to reason with him. And he's trying to talk him down. And he's like, hey, if you do good, will you not be blessed? And if you do bad, will you not be cursed? And he said basically that you're letting evil take over your heart, and you need to rule over it. So if he was a serpent seed, damned from the beginning, and had no hope, why would God have reasoned with him and tried to, he had a choice. He just chose wickedness. So I think that's what we're dealing with here. I think that, when Jesus came, died on the cross, he opened up that door for anybody who chooses. So we all have free will. But I think that bloodline, it might maybe kind of tip you, over one way and make you maybe want to follow in the family line, so to speak. But so I think that's why they have free will just like us. And I think there are maybe some flesh and blood ones left, because like you said, there's a range of spectrums. Some people have physical, they say they're all physical. They got the footprints. And then there's some people that say, oh, no, it's a spiritual thing, and that they do mind speak. And sometimes there's orbs and UFOs associated with some of these sightings. I think the theory that I've come up with kind of puts it all in a red bow, like no other theory has before. Because could there be a remnant left? I believe so. We have the stories of the Kandahar giant, out there in Iraq. It said that he come out of a cave. He was covered in red hair. And it talks about these are cave dwelling, things that they're described as the ultimate hunters, the mighty hunters. They have human intelligence. We look at pandas as a good example. Those guys were only found in the last 100 years, but there was about thousands of years. But everybody said, oh, that's a myth. That's a legend. That's what parents tell their kids to stay out of the woods, kind of like how we do Bigfoot now. So could there be an ancient remnant left, in the catacombs and caves underneath our feet? I think it's possible. But at the same time, the biblical worldview, the book of Enoch says when the angels came down and bred with the daughters of men, that when they died, their spirits were not earthbound or heaven bound. So therefore they were cursed to wander the earth and torment mankind. So I talked about Esau. He intermarries with these Nephilim giants and interbreeds with them. And so they're making these hairy giant feral giants, and they were described as sorcerers and necromancers and shapeshifters, like I mentioned. So I think the spiritual side of it that we see, I don't think it's out of the question to say that, these are Nephilimic. And according to the stories I just talked about, they were sorcerers and necromancers, shapeshifters. Would they not want to take a familiar form when they manifest that was their form that commanded respect and fear? And maybe that's why you have portals and phasing in and out of reality, mind speak, and all this stuff, because these are the spirits of a Nephilimic feral giant sorcerer race.
Do you think phenomena like dogman or werewolf may be associated with the supernatural side of the phenomena, like you were just saying?
Very well could be, but I'm open to the thought of, like, our government maybe finding some DNA or something and trying to manipulate it and make some super soldiers and stuff. So there's never black and white. I hate people when they say it's either this or it's that, man, and seeing the world in black and white. Yeah. Man, the world's in full color. It's usually a mixture and a mess of all kinds of different things. So I think it could be a hybrid race, maybe remnant left over. You have some spiritual side from the Nephilim married in there, but we cannot rule out that maybe one of these guys were captured or caught, or they got a DNA sample and they're doing some DNA CRISPR technology stuff like they did with the dire wolf. I don't think it's out of the question.
Well, as far as apocalyptic future possibilities, I'd much rather a Bigfoot invasion over AI governance and law enforcement any day. Speaking of that, what are your thoughts on where we're at collectively? Do you think that we may be experiencing prophetic times, apocalyptic times, that prophecy may be coming to fruition?
I do. I believe so. And I know some people that are not Christians, laugh at us when we say stuff like that, because every generation, after the resurrection of Christ has said, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. But we can't deny, man, we are closer than we've ever been. And now the systems are in place, because we hear about a one world government. What's all over our news right now? Okay. We hear about a blockchain system. We're going to digital currency and a blockchain system right now. A lot of countries already are. So they're going to know every dollar you spend. We have Palantir, the surveillance state, cameras on every corner. They know everywhere you go. You got your smart cars, your smart TVs, your smartphones. They're listening to everything you say, your driving patterns, your eating habits. I mean, they know you inside and out. And the book of Revelation says those who doesn't bend the knee, would be killed. Well, how are they going to know that you're not bowing and with the program? Because all this system that I've just talked about is now in place. And then they have the blockchain system. It says those who do not take the mark will not be able to buy, sell, or trade. Well, if you're on this blockchain system and you're not a good old boy like they want you to be, they can turn off your bank account, just like they did those truckers in Canada during COVID. So yeah, if you're out of line, you won't be able to buy, sell, or trade. And it's kind of, leading up to China. China is kind of like the forefront of this stuff. They have this social credit score, cameras on every corner. They know every dime they spend. And you get like a report card like we did in school. If you show up to work every day, you get a check. If you have, less than 3 children, check, and you get a social score. And if your social score is not good enough, you can't go to the movies. You can't go out to eat, all these other things. I think that we are, approaching that, and especially AI, all that stuff. It's just a matter of time before that outgrows us and replaces us, man.
There's a popular discussion amongst the truth or conspiracy community right now that we may be in what's known as Satan's little season, a period of time after the millennial reign of Christ, where basically Lucifer has free reign over everything. Does that connect with you or something else?
No, me, I mean, I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I'm probably one of the most open-minded, Christians that you'll talk to. Uh, but I've heard people talk about that. I've actually had some people on the show talking about it. They raise some really compelling questions, and point to some really compelling things. But me, do I think it's possible? Yeah, I mean, if we're honest, I mean, anything is possible. But I'm just not there personally. Yeah. And my only reason for that, and I've even told, JT, JT follows JC, Joe, we're friends and we talk a lot. And he's, staunchly on that side. And I've told him, I said, man, one of my big hangups is if Christ already came, there would be some kind of memory left. We would know about it. There would be documentation. There would be, legends, oral stories, something like that. And also, this is supposed to be a loving God. Why would he allow his reign to be erased, and therefore all of us, have a higher probability of not believing and going to hell, So
well, that's where some of the Tartaria theories, I believe, could come in, where our history has been completely manipulated and erased. We had a massive cataclysm to wipe out most of the population. The theories get wild, up to cloning and replacing humans. So who knows what the truth is? It's difficult enough to know what happened 10 years ago. I think we're in the middle of another reset right now. They are erasing information left and right, and I believe they do that so the next generation has no idea about our true history. But trying to go back to our ancient past and have a really strong understanding of what happened is quite difficult.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, too, is I tell people, some people really get hyper fixated on things and get really tore up, And I tell people, stuff like that, I'll entertain it and listen to it and, and try to reason it out. But me personally is like, my foundation is in Christ. So my relationship and my salvation doesn't rely on the shape of this realm. It doesn't rely on if we're in Satan's little season or not. No matter any of those situations, I'm good, bro. So I'm not going to stress and worry about it. I'm not going to get all worked up and fight people and argue with them if we are this or if we are that, or, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I will entertain and look into anything, but all that stuff is just extra. It's for me, the foundation, Christ, that's what's important. That's what's going to ultimately be my covering before God, Jesus. So like I said, some people get tore up, some people get hyper fixated, and I'm just not one of those guys personally.
Right on. Well, Justin, this was great. We'll definitely have to do this again. Like you said, we barely scratched the surface on your work. Have any upcoming projects, anything that the audience could look forward to?
Yeah, well, right now, like I said, I just recently went full time. I got a couple more books in my head that I'm wanting to write, so I'll be starting on those pretty soon. And I've already filmed probably at least three mini documentaries. So I got hours and hours of footage from mounds.
Nice.
I've done a lot of traveling and went to all the different mound sites and got drone shots and all that kind of stuff. And actually went on a Bigfoot hunt with some friends, a bunch of content creators, and we filmed the whole thing. So I got a bunch of cool footage that I just need to take the time and piece them together. So I'm hoping to this next year to release a couple documentaries and hopefully another book.
Right on, man. Well, like I said, we'll definitely have to do this again. Before I let you go, give everyone your links again.
Hey, brother, I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversations. I tell people I'm all about exchanging of puzzle pieces, man. I think everybody has pieces. Nobody has it all figured out, and we're not going to figure out more unless we have these conversations and exchange our ideas with each other. So thank you.
Yeah, man, thank you.
But yeah, as far as me, man, Prometheus Lens podcast, once again, anywhere you can consume content, Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, all that good stuff. Same thing with the social medias. The book is Epic of Esau, Birthright, and Seed War. You can find all 3 formats, including Audible, on Amazon, or you can go to my website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com, and get one directly from me that I'll sign for you. And I also give out little goodie bags for all the ones that buy directly from me. I'll send you a handful of stickers and some custom bookmarks and little things like that. So, but yeah, that's it, man. I appreciate you having me and let me get in front of your listeners.
Sweet, man. Well, Justin, thank you. Like I said, we'll do it again. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then. Watch Doors of Perception, now on Amazon Prime. You can now stream the forbidden documentary Occult Louisiana free on Tubi TV. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order. Hello friends, I am so excited to tell you about Independent Media Token. Independent Media Token is a brand new way to show your support for independent media without having to donate a dime. Independent Media Token is a cryptocurrency on the Solana blockchain designed to generate funds to promote and foster the growth of independent content creators, allowing them to engage in their art without having to worry about being demonetized. Through a network of media partners, of which you yourself can become a part of, Independent Media Token's goal is to ensure the powers that be can never cut off all of our areas of funding and censor the only free voices left in the world. Join the movement today. You can pick up Independent Media Token using Phantom Wallet or the Solana wallet of your choice, where you can easily swap your Solana for IMT. Grab some IMT today and remember to always know your team. To learn more, visit independentmediatoken.com or use the link right in the description. Are you and your family prepared for an emergency? Maybe the fake alien invasion? Now is the time to prepare yourself and your family for any event. Check out Prep Starts Now. Their mission is to provide high-quality preparedness products that empower individuals and families to be ready for any situation. They're committed to delivering reliable, trusted gear to ensure your safety, security, and peace of mind in times of need. Their product selection is carefully curated to provide you with the essential gear you need to stay prepared. From emergency kits to tactical tools, every item is chosen for its reliability and practicality. Prep Starts Now understands the importance of family, and their goal is to equip you with everything you need to build a solid plan for your family's preparedness. In today's ever-changing world, being prepared is more important than ever, and Prep Starts Now is here to help you and your family stay ready with quality products and practical guidance. Use the link in the description and get 15% off your order. We live in an incredible age of information. More and more, we're discovering that we've been lied to and misled about much of our human history. Cory Hughes is providing profound revelations about World War I, World War II, the JFK assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, and much, much more on his new Substack, Bloody History. Subscribe now for as little as $5 monthly. Just click that link right in the description to get started now and learn about our true history.